Hi everyone, thanks again for joining Stewart for Good. If you joined us last week, we had part one of this interview with Iain Middleton from Vivo in Perth, and he's still with me on the line. We've recorded this one via Zoom. Iain, thanks for joining again. You're back with us. We spoke about the systems for waterproofing pools, which you were very passionate about and shared some real gems there. And today we're going to talk about the mosaic and the tiling part of it, because this is the one that people look at and they see, and we see it often go ugly. And so before we get into that, Iain, was there anything you wanted to just recap on for the listeners or the tilers who are watching this one to remember what they need to be aware of before they start to tile? If there's a simple recap.
It's certainly trust your pool builder. I mean, don't trust your pool builder. He doesn't know what's underneath that shell. He's got someone to spray the shell. Separating your work from someone else goes along with a systems approach. So a systems approach is what I'm preaching, whether it's one company or another. Don't mix and match. Go with a system and follow that exactly. What you don't want is the builder to subcontract to the pool builder, who subcontracts to the tiler, who subcontracts to labourers, all with their own ABN. The client's left at the end of the day with a bad job, often, not always. And there's a problem with that to start with. But usually the house builder doesn't know anything about swimming pools, and the tiler doesn't know anything about swimming pools. And the pool builder is the one that really needs to do the work. But a systems approach for starters. And we've mentioned that in the previous video. I'd like to show you the choice of tile now. Once we've got that surface all ready to go, I would like to show you some various variations on a theme.
Sure, listen.
And help the tiler. I've always tried to champion for tilers, the worker, not the manufacturer. But it's got me in hot water a couple of times as well. So I've had a few run-ins with manufacturers. However, I've built bridges and I've done technical work for all of the companies from Mappe and Laticrete and RLA, Sika, Gripset, where hopefully we'll do some more work together. But Trend Mosaics, Bezzazza Mosaics, Sitius Mosaics, Izari Mosaics. There's even Layla in New South Wales. And because of, I'm going to claim this, but because of my actions and because of my passion about mosaics, I've helped increase or raise the quality of a lot of companies. They realise that sometimes the quality control hasn't been as good as it could be, so they've looked at that, and we've helped, and I've helped a number of companies develop processes that deliver pool quality swimming pool tiles. When I say pool quality swimming pool tiles, we're going to refer to our standards, really, that says 90% of the back of that tile should engage with adhesive that's sticking that tile onto the wall. In America, it's 95%. So that limits the amount of mesh back tiles that tend to happen in America. I know you want me to.
When you say that to me, I'm thinking to myself, well, most tilers now, and it's great. I see some of the forums out there, and there's this great generation of new tilers. And I come from a family of tilers. So my father was a tiler builder. My uncles, my cousins, they're still in the game. And it's one of those trades that is very different than others, because a great tiler he leaves his stamp on it. I remember my dad always used to say the most satisfying thing about being a tiler was you go to a job and the way you leave it is different, and you finish it and you can walk away and go, how good does this look? Whereas a lot of other trades, it's a structural part of it, and you don't get really the acknowledgement of, and so there's an art to it. And I think the best of the Europeans have really shown it. The master trades, the master tile. I remember when I was a kid, some of the German migrants, Italian migrants came over. They were artists in what they could do with tiling, and a lot of those skills have been passed on. Unfortunately, not as where I'd like to see it. But when you talk about 95% backing of a tile, I'm thinking that's not that hard to get. 95% adhesion on the rear of a tile. In fact, you know, I always believe with a waterproofing application, it needs to be 100%. But explain to me now where this is difficult to get or achieve with a mosaic.
Okay, it's often difficult to get with modern day mesh back tiles. Now, mesh back tiles often have PVA, polyvinyl acetate glue, to stick the mesh onto the back of the tile. Now, years ago, we'd get some beautiful Italian tiles, and there was some little dots of PVA glue holding the mesh on, and there wasn't 2% of the back of the tile covered with PVA glue. What we've had in the last 10 years is mesh back tiles that have 60–70% of the back of the tile is covered with PVA glue to hold the mesh on. Once you put that tile in water, the mesh glue creates a bit of a bond breaker between the tile and the surface you're putting it onto.
And so, the problem with that is, for those of you that don't want a real science lesson, PVAs are fantastic adhesion, have had fantastic adhesion properties in dry applications.
Yes,
so
wood glue. Yeah,
you might be able to, it's a wood glue, but unfortunately we've had brands that said you can put in cement, but it's really an art and craft product when it comes to cement. You put it near water, and I'm actually going to do a video on this and show it. It will disintegrate in minutes.
You'd like to think that they would stick mesh back tiles on with SPR. It's really difficult to do that. It's very different type of product. It's great to put in a liquid to make a suspension and then use that in your batch water. But I've sort of gone off track. So basically, the back of the mosaic tile, we're talking about glass, can be covered by plastic. Now, this follows on from a guy called Peter Hartog, who exposed this in the 80s, 70s. Peter Hartog's article was called Tiling at the Deep End, and then there's Tiling at the Deep End Revisited, and it documents various importers and processes that use PVA glue to stick mesh on the back of tiles. Now, once it went to India and China, and the manufacturers started to mass produce these tiles, quite often you'll get a humid environment, and the PVA glue will spread out onto the back of the tile. And as I said, in effect, you're creating a bond breaker. As soon as you put it underwater, the PVA will emulsify, and quite often the tile will pop off. Now, it's not always the cause of failure. Don't get me wrong. I'm not pointing a finger at mesh back tiles necessarily being the problem, but we've been brought now with polyurethane, either dots or string on the back of tiles, and when you buy a sheet of tiles, it will look like, I don't know what video you've got up there.
Yeah, there it is. Great.
That's a set of tiles that you expect to stick on a pool wall, and they won't come off. Well, that's the hope. My problem with that is the fact that in America, they won't allow this type of product to go in a pool, or should we say that the most reputable pool builders, because you've now got plastic on the back of the tile. Our standards say that 90% of that tile needs to attach to adhesive. We've now got possibly 20% of that tile is now covered with plastic. Now, that plastic, you would hope, lasts forever, stuck to that tile. Unfortunately, in my experience, it does not. So after about a year or two, it turns brown and releases from the tile. It's not stuck to the tile anymore. So you've now relying on what was left of the glass to adhere to the wall with the adhesive you've used to stick the tile on. And this goes for a lot of products. There's a lot of them that they just, the plastic degrades. Now, anyone with a brain is going to think, well, if I put plastic in a swimming pool that's sticking a tile on, what's the likelihood of that plastic coming off? Now, sometimes it will come off, sometimes it won't. It doesn't, in my opinion, leave enough glass to stick to glues. Hence, I was very lucky. I went for paper face right from the beginning, so I never had sort of issues with this. But it's a very common thing that you see failures from swimming pools, and I've got pictures that I'm hoping that you'll...
Yeah, we'll put them up and the guys can see them now. But I want to ask you quickly, so just to clarify that, it was a good point you made, because we've been preaching SBR for years. Everyone wants to get sexy with all these polyurethanes, etc. But SBR technology is real simple and it's proven.
Yeah.
It's a great additive in cementitious systems, hence why our 11Y has been our flagship for that side. And things like SBRs are great in membranes, like the Gripset 38 FC, the Hydroban, I think the Mappy Gum have got their product that's SBR based as well. And these are proven, tested, and they are the best in certain applications for waterproof membranes. However, as you mentioned, SBR is an issue when it comes to tacking, like a PVA would for netting. But are we talking about the PVA or the polyurethane adhesive failing on that netting, or the plastic itself failing?
Right. Well, I let it in there with mesh back tiles. We don't see a lot of them anymore for swimming pools. They phased them out and brought in these polyurethane style back mounted mosaics.
Yeah.
Now the plastic can and will fail.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's the sole reason that we see lots of failures in swimming pools. I would just like to say that, technically speaking, face-mounted mosaics are superior. They're better. They last.
Are they made by manufacturers, Ian, that are specifically saying their mosaic is suitable for a pool application?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
And initially they're easy to put on. I see, as I say, one a week where there's tiles popping off. It may or may not be the fact that there's plastic is releasing from the tiles, which it probably is. I'm trying to sort of suggest that face mounting is superior to this. Now, sticking to plastic, glue sticking to plastic doesn't work very well. And then someone who's tried to stick tiles on a fiberglass swimming pool with an ordinary cementitious adhesive, they'll quite testify that it doesn't work, because plastic expands and contracts and et cetera, et cetera. So if you had 100% plastic over the back of these tiles, you wouldn't want to stick them in, because you're sticking plastic to the wall. The plastic is stuck to the glass. If the plastic that's stuck to the glass fails, then the tile will pop off. Simple as that. So that's why our standards say 90% of that tile needs to stick to the wall of the pool. Now, it's very difficult when a company either tells you their pool quality, and how do you know that that plastic's going to come off? There are variations on the theme. There are fake mosaics out there, what we call fake mosaics, that claim to be from a superior manufacturer. They're in the same boxes. They're in the same. They're like the world of fake goods. It happens everywhere. So it may be the fact that that's happening. This little tool. Now, this little tool has got 100 squares on each of those squares for different size mosaic tiles.
I'm just going to show it like that, Ian, so people can see it maybe a little bit closer.
Yep.
What Ian's talking about. But if you look at that there, guys, you can see that on the white backing. So each of those squares, you're saying, Ian, is a 10 by 10 grid.
That's right. It's a 10 by 10 grid that gives you an idea of how much is glued on the back of that tile. There's a 20 millimeter one. There's a 23 millimeter one and a 25 millimeter one for different size mosaics. However, most of the glass mosaics that you see that are like this that I've got in my hand here have got a little chamfered edge. So what you're actually trying to stick on is an 18 by 18 millimeter square onto a wall. It's not really 20%. So we're actually giving them the benefit of the doubt, making that 20%. But if you hold that over the back of the glass mosaic tile, you can count the squares that have, or plastic that you can see through. And a much better way of doing it is to color that plastic in with a black pen, and you can color that where the plastic is and not the glass, so that when you do put that over the top, you can see the shadow of the plastic. I don't know whether that's picking up pretty good.
We'll get a close-up of it. Yeah, understand.
Yeah.
And so
now,
what should a tiler do? He does that test, and what's he looking for then?
Well, if he's looking, if more than 10 squares are covered with the black mark that you've put on there on the plastic, they don't comply to Australian standards. Now, some people are going to say, oh, the Australian standards are rubbish anyway. I don't find that. I find them very, very useful, very, very much a guidance thing. But they're only guidance, they're recommendations. They're not necessarily law, but they're there for a reason. This is probably where I would really like people to read Peter Hartog's articles. And you know,
we'll put a link to that, Ian, at the end of the show.
That would be wonderful. I can put links to stuff. There's also articles by Bezzazza. Edward Lowe wrote a lovely article about mosaic tiles. And, you know, when I went to Italy, they promoted paper face being technically superior for that very reason. Now, these ones do comply, these blue ones. There's about 8% of plastic on the back of those tiles. These don't comply. There's about 25% plastic on the back of the tiles. Now, I don't want to get into trouble, as I've got in before, on naming who's who.
Yeah. But this is for the tiler. This is the tiler's protection. This is the waterproofer's protection potentially, and also the pool builder and some of the builders watching. So the scenario is this, and I had a situation which was one of the worst I'd ever seen before, and I was so annoyed and pissed off after I'd been down there to help the client out with the repair, and then you find out afterwards what really happened. But they'd used, the owner supplied the tile.
Yep.
They were an out of, you know, it was a fire sale, a mosaic, and this thing was exposed into the sun, and literally the tile, when I saw them come off the wall, they were bent. Yep. And I said, there's no way the tiler tiled them like this. So they've obviously not suitable for outdoors or sun or whatever it could be. But the problem was the guy who tiled it accepted them.
Yeah, that's the problem.
The tile, and so this sort of tool, and long story, that one went ugly. They had to do it again, and surprise, surprise, they didn't use the same tile. But this one now, this tool is taking care of the adhesion properties of the glass mosaic to the adhesive to ensure you get that 95% contact.
Yeah, 90 in Australia, but yes,
okay.
You're absolutely correct, because it has to be done before you put the tiles on. Most of the boxes you open a box of tiles and it says, if you use this tile, you accept its quality.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no comeback. If you put this tile on a pool and it comes off, that's down to you. If, for instance, you find with this little tool that there's more than 10% plastic on the back of the tile, then it's really not compliant to Australian standards. And if you ever get to a court, which it very rarely gets to, it usually gets settled outside, but if you get to a court, a judge will say to you, did you follow Australian standards?
Yep. And
you have to say, no, I didn't.
There are governing standards.
End of conversation. Bang his gavel and thank you very much. And
the simple thing there, Ian, is that tool, this costs very little to have in any tiler's toolbox. You test that tile. If you didn't buy it, you comply. It's all good. If it wasn't, you got to tell your owner or the buyer that this is not compliant, and either change the tile or I can't do the job.
Correct. Or even before you buy the tile, you can take this to the tile shop and say,
that's where a good tiler will guide their client.
Yes.
In their quotations and say, hey guys, you know, this is a real simple one. I can give you one of these before you go and select your tile. Make sure this is it, because I guarantee there's a lot of tile stores that don't even know about this stuff. that are selling
Absolutely, absolutely. They don't really want to know this stuff. They're salespeople. We've got a beautiful tile shop here. I won't mention any names, but it's filled with 25-year-old Italian young ladies that sell the tile. They're not
very good short black coffee as well, I'm guessing.
absolutely, and I would buy tiles from. As soon as you go in there, you're there to spend money, and they will sell you tiles. But being informed with stuff like this, if you want to take that risk, that's because it's all about risk, as you'll appreciate, Phil.
You nailed it though. That you said it doesn't go to court often, but it doesn't go to court because it's more expensive to get to court. But the reality is, you get put into a corner, and we say this all the time when we do our GAPP training. You need to understand what you're accepting: the substrate, the tile, the adhesive, the structure. Because if you inherit it, if you accept it, it's yours. And if it's an ugly baby, it's going to be your ugly baby.
Absolutely.
And you've got to sort that out at the start. This is about being the expert, guys. You're the tiler, you're the waterproofer. You are the expert that someone's engaging your services. This is not a discussion about how cheap my price is, etc. This is about you standing up a level above and lifting the industry in this country. We want to do it right. We want to be part of that change. And that's really what we're trying to do is get you to do the right thing, because the more complaints that are out there, it doesn't matter whose product it is that's being used or what tile has been used, it impacts the industry. We all look like cowboys, and we're trying to make sure we separate the crap from the quality, and master trades is what we want.
Absolutely. You're spot on. Absolutely. Every single time. I mean, there's various, strings to that bow. It's not an uncomplicated area of, most tilers get to a job and the builders bought the tiles or the clients bought the tiles, and they don't get involved in that point of it. But with a $70, $80, $90,000 installation of glass mosaics in a pool, a $2,000 waterproofing would solve a lot of problems. Face mounted tiles would solve problems. I mean, there's even these type of tiles which are what I would call side mounted tiles. These have a less than 5% on the back of the tile with the plastic, but there are some fakes out there. And now sometimes you'll find these little dots go up 3/4 of the length of the tile height, so that when you have a grouting issue and you see these little white dots all over the place, so again, you really want to make sure you know what you're buying. There's some beautiful tiles out there. And I don't necessarily want to bad things, but if we can just eliminate one variable, and that big variable is how much plastic's on the back of that tile.
That's a real valuable tool you're giving there. And look, there's a lot of guys I know that are doing the right thing. They ask questions, but this is something that even, and I know from, if we had one of our guys that have been in the waterproofing game for a long time, and even tiling game, and some expert tiling guys out there, even with some of the manufacturers who I know. But the issue is, if they aren't aware of this issue, they might be giving you advice on how to fix a tile, but where you're behind the 8 ball from the first minute because of this plastic issue that Ian's uncovered and advised. So really good knowledge there, Ian. I wanted to ask you. Sorry, go on. Finish it.
Well, they're gonna hate me because they want to sell tile, but I'm trying to champion for the tiler and the client. And what is the best choice? What is your best choice? And this little tool just gives you a little bit of science. It doesn't take away from the fact they're beautiful tiles, but that plastic quite often doesn't last on the back of the tile. So would you buy that tile if you knew that plastic was going to fail? And probably the answer is not. But it's not always why tiles fail. It just eliminates, or at least controls, one of the variables. But it also brings in a problem where you're going to use face-mounted tiles. And now face-mounted tiles, you need a lot of training with that. You need a lot of preparation. This is where it can take, quite a while to learn how to do this stuff. It's not just bring a tiler out of the bathroom and get him to do a pool. Most tilers will have only done one pool and they'll never do one again. I hear that a lot. And then there's people that just specialize in this stuff. So
Can I ask you, just for the guys, where can they get these tools from?
You can get one of. I've got a box of these tiles, but there is a telephone number on the back.
Okay, we'll put that up on the screen. I've got that here, and we'll put that
on there. It's
and
possibly the little bit we've trimmed off because it.
We'll get that up there so everyone can see that. Yeah. But the other question,
1300 Europe.
1300 Europe. There you go. Now, we know all the manufacturers have got quality pool tile adhesives, and it's always important to use an adhesive that's recommended for a pool environment.
Yep.
Probably want to spend the time on the discussion about adhesives, but I do want to talk about grout, and I want to talk about silicon and/or expansion joints with tiling systems.
Yep.
Because I have seen them go wrong. We mentioned before about epoxies, that they're not UV resistant, so it's not, even though they might have great chemical resistance. But with the grout that you use in a glass mosaic or a ceramic tile in a pool, should they be using an additive included into the grout instead of a standard grout that you might be using in a bathroom?
Yes, they should. I mean, there's two types of additive. One will make it harder and give it longevity, and one will make it more flexible. Obviously, it's the more flexible you want to do it. You want to make the grout more flexible. There's really, in my opinion, again, any need for an expansion joint in a glass mosaic tiled swimming pool. However,
there's not, you're saying?
There's not. No, I've never put one in. There's, you know, when I went to America, they put silicon joints on the outside edges. As you know, let's bring me back to your. But they put expansion joints on the outside curve. Yep. Not expansion joints, a silicon joint.
Silicon joint, yeah. Okay.
And a silicon joint on the inside, and they will put silicon joints through the pool. Now, I've seen more silicon joint failures than I have pool failures that don't have silicon joints.
And why is that? Why is it a true silicon they're using?
Quite often it's modified. Well, they're doing modified products these days, modified polyurethanes, MO silicons, etc.
You don't put a polyurethane near a chlorine environment, but anyway, that they need to understand that one.
Yeah. But what tends to happen? You need a primer, and the primer is quite often not used, or they'll start cutting the joints out where they've over put adhesive on, and they're cutting through membrane. But to put an expansion joint in a swimming pool, it's not a bad idea if it's done properly. And again, there are, I don't want to drop names, but there's a particular primer that one of the larger companies would recommend, but it's extremely expensive. I mean, massively so, to where it's, I think, like $4,000 a litre, but you're only buying a little tiny portion of it, but it fails. So if you can get a flexible joint, you've got, you know, the expansion coefficient of a glass tile is 0.003 per meter in temperature. So, and it's a tiny tile. It's a very tiny tile. So each tile is expanding and contracting with temperature. A pool environment, quite often it's a stabilized temperature. You've got between 25 degrees and 30 odd degrees with your pool. It doesn't fluctuate. However, until you get to the waterline tile. Correct. So an expansion joint under the edge of the coping, really good idea. Some of them put expansion joints or silicon joints in change of plane, which is where our standards sort of suggest you do that. It actually says there that not for mosaics, as they're not needed, but it's an option. I've never done it, and one of the things I started to specialize in was curves, and I instead of a sort of square edge or a square edge, I'd put a curve on there. So that spread that expansion out a little bit, and worked for me. You know, I sort of started to do ergonomic seating, where you don't slide off the spar when you're sitting in it. It sort of sits your bottom on it. So the curves helped me, curving on the front step and on the inside of the step. And I've never put an expansion joint in a swimming pool. Perhaps I should.
With glass mosaic, though, I just want to stress that. You're talking about mosaics now.
Yeah, I'm talking about glass mosaics with a commercial.
Ceramic you'd still need to.
I would definitely put that in.
One of the things that, just before I forget, and we didn't cover, but you raised an important point about coping. And I'm just going to go back to the waterproofing application of pools, which we missed. But guys, when you are waterproofing a pool, don't be an idiot and finish the membrane at the top edge. You must bring that out and even be on the coping. Always recommend to your client to actually do the podium of the pool surround. It's a full tanking, because you'd be surprised how much water can start from those areas, those tiles or those finishes outside the pool, and then you get capillary reaction and it seeps underneath the membrane.
Absolutely.
That issue. So you've got to tank it. That external area of a pool podium, actually, you'd be surprised how much water that has, both during usage of pools in the summer, but also in the winter when it's exposed to water.
Yeah.
And it retains moisture there. And normally they're the sorts of tiles people go with that wouldn't be glass mosaic. So they tend to be a little bit more absorbent, bigger grout joints, water transmission's far higher. So tank the whole area. You know, when we get commercial jobs, architects will tank all of it outside the pool and underneath the coping. So many domestic situations, I see these guys put coping tiles down and there's 50 mil of membrane that's just come up the edge of the top of the pool. And, you know, you're just creating a disaster there. So keep that in mind. I just want to throw that one in because we forgot to mention that before.
Yeah, I mean, we had an issue with a South Australian pool that I went to see. And the pool was fully tank waterproofed, epoxy grout moisture, and there was efflorescence growing half-inch deep on top of the coping. And they couldn't work out where that water was coming from until we located the tap on the outside of the home that was dripping. They had a leaky tap that was going into the ground and going to the pool shell and coming up through the coping. Yeah. Growing this white efflorescence, which, you know, while I'm on that subject with choosing products to use, we've got an issue here with a pool that I'm looking at the moment. The guys used Bricky's light cement. I don't know whether you get that over there. Yeah. It's a sort of mortar. It's great for bricklaying, whatever you're going to do, but it's half lime, half cement. So it's got the lime. The lime is your enemy. Lime, once it's dissolved and then gets to the water and comes up, that white stuff that you see growing like crystal, calcium hydroxide, and then it forms calcium carbonate, and you start getting this white buildup on tiles. And quite often it's the chemistry of the pool, the pH of the pool. You can adjust that and play with that a little bit to make it a little bit more. I mean, you can take it below 7 and hopefully dissolve some of that stuff. And once it's up to 7.8, 7.9, it starts to grow this efflorescence everywhere. Now, you mentioned when we first started in the other episode that swimming pools, particularly in WA, I don't know for Adelaide, but they let them go green in the winter. No one goes there. And then it's going to be a nice weekend this weekend, so they bomb it with acid and chemicals to get it clean. There's people swimming in it within 2 or 3 days of you doing that. That fluctuation, that pH fluctuation, is your enemy. That you really don't want to do that. So waterproofing a pool also stabilizes to a certain extent that it stops the water sucking lime out of the pool shell, calcium out of the pool shell. There's a number of reasons you'd membrane a pool, and it's not always just for waterproofing. Quite often the penetrations are where it leaks. It doesn't necessarily leak through the concrete shell. It might get saturated, but there's a number of processes involved that the pool tiler needs to know about, because sometimes
they see the efflorescence build up around light fittings and penetration and railings and all that, and coping particularly. We see that all the time.
So I'd love to see pool tiling as a separate entity. I mean, when you look at tiling generally, it's an enormous area of expertise, and most people only ever do part of it. They just do floor tiling or wall tiling or bathroom tiling or pool tiling. It's very rarely does a tiler know the whole tiling world, as it were. It's a vast area. At one point, rendering and screeding were all part of tiling. They were all part of bricklaying at one point. And then they've split this up. And I fear what we're going to get here, Phil, is licensing for waterproofing. I think that's the next thing.
We're on the path of that.
Yeah. And I feel that's going to be a disaster, because you're going to get non-tilers doing waterproofing for tilers. Now, when that fails, and I've got, again, photographs of cigarette butts painted over with membrane, and they don't care, or they'll put waterproofing on a non-pre-slope first of all, then render it or screed it. So you've got water sitting underneath that. There's all kinds of problems with that. I'd love to see tilers get the license for waterproofing. And
tilers can. And look, we are seeing a lot of tilers coming to our GAPP courses and learning.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going with it. Yeah.
Not just actually learning to waterproof for their tiling applications. We've had a lot of good tilers come in wanting to understand about learning how to waterproof around landscaped areas and external areas that they might not tile, but they understand the whole connection of waterproofing in their tiling trade.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are some really good waterproofers out there that, although they'll never tile, want to understand the tiling trade. I think what you've shown today with these mosaics will be very knowledgeable for a lot of traditional waterproofers that will never tile, but they'll be able to tell their client about this because they're value adding to their trade. We're all connected, somehow in this industry, we're all cousins and brothers. That's how I look at it. And we need to understand that, and sisters, I'm not shutting them out as well, but we need to make sure that we integrate ourselves. No trade should just say, well, bugger this, I'm doing my bit and I'm not really give a shit about what the next guy's going to be up for. They need to be doing it properly, and understanding, okay, what's the other trade or who's before me. That is really the job of the builder. I get it, but I always keep saying this change, this part of the change is staying from the bottom, come from the bottom up. It's not coming from the top down. We're not getting the authorities to put these changes in place. So it's the experts who are the guys at the cold face laying product, dealing with manufacturers and suppliers, and then they can create the change to the builder. Because, I had this discussion the other week. They said, the architect should have put that detail in. I said, listen, mate, the architect should have. But the reality is the architect, when he finishes his job, he doesn't go around to his client and go, that was just such a great waterproof detail I put in that building. He's looking at it from afar and going, what a fantastic looking building. They're a decorative artist. But the waterproof or the tiler is responsible for that part. And that's where they can educate the specifier, the architect or the engineer and the building client. And so we've just got to, this needs to be a more holistic approach to what we do in this industry. And I don't really care what products people prefer to use. There's people like yourself, Ian, out there that are a great resource for more knowledge. And when I do get to go to WA next on a plane, I'll definitely will spend some more time with you.
Oh, we'll have another coffee, and I'll buy it this time. I think one of the important things,
instead, if you're going to buy.
You've hit the nail on the head. I say to a lot of people, education is the only thing no one can ever take away from you.
Correct.
Right? It's never. So I've made it my business to go to MAPE, Laticrete, RLA, SICA, and get their training. And I want to see the Gripset training that's coming to WA. I want to support that 100%. And I mean, last thing I'll say really is that when you get these guys that say to you, I haven't had a failure for 30 years. I've never had a tile come. I've never had a callback from my bathrooms. My answer to that is, would you call back the guy that ruined your bathroom to do it again? Would you call them back? So it's a really stupid thing to say, especially as the fact that I look forward and I'll say, well, what's new coming out? Where are we going? Not that I've been doing it like this for 30 years, so why do I change? I want to know what all these light adhesives are. What sort of asbestos is that in the products? What does epoxy do? Why is that epoxy better than that epoxy? What happens? Why did that do that? Why did that? And that's where I've gone with it. So I've ended up with a system approach from all the manufacturers, and Gripset have one in their brochure already. I've got, I would love to explore some of this. Some of the I say old school. There's I think one company put out once that, oh, you don't need a bandage in the corner of our waterproofing product. So everyone then didn't put a bandage in. They don't bandage the corners anymore. They don't put with a class 3 membrane. They don't put a bond breaker in there. And yet it's far better to do that. You'll get a much more robust job if you start doing it, I suppose, the proper way, the old-fashioned way. But I'm open to learning more. Why can't we do that we never used to do? I mean, those sorts of things. And I've done this for so long, I've never had a failure. My answer again would be go and buy a lotto ticket, because you've been very lucky, you know.
Yeah, well, you don't know about it. But look, I think to end on that note, knowledge is power. We always talk about that. And the speed of knowledge and change now in the world around us, whether it's things like this, you know, our phones, the technology that's available to us, we're doing things now that tradespeople weren't doing 10 years ago. In the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to be doing things we weren't doing now. And so we need to be ahead of the curve. Yeah. And even things that are as old as the Egyptians, like cement and lime and additives, we can still understand how they work in the modern day construction.
That's right.
We're going to modular. We're seeing CLT timber come into play. We're seeing all these lightweight synthetic materials. We've got to embrace it, not be fearful of what is out there, and see how we can play our part in that. And that's really where, you know, our drive is with our labs, our R&D side, and our people. And I like that with our trades. I love it when they question. They ask a question because they keep you accountable, and they also give you ideas. And we see when things come up. I've learned a bit today, Ian, that even when I discussed it last year, I had no idea about. And I think that's the part I want to leave today on today's note. Guys, knowledge is power. Be powerful and be part of that change. Iain Middleton, it's been fantastic having you on Seal for Good. If anyone wants to get hold of you or reach you, they can get you on Facebook on Vivo. It
seems to be the way that the world's going.
How else can they reach out to you?
I'm with the Tape College, as I say. Probably Facebook would be the easiest way of getting hold of me. Then there's just Vivo Middleton or Vivo. If you put Vivo into Google, you've got to spell it right. VVO, not VI.
Yeah. With the logo, which is a great kangaroo there with the tile.
Yeah, little kangaroo. But I've sort of hidden myself away. I tend not to do too much consultation anymore. It's too complicated. It costs too much money. And it's not really where I want to be. But if I can help you, I will. And I'd love to be involved in stuff like, you know, promoting the right systems to use. So, you know, please keep me informed. I'm going to be passionate about this trade till the day I die. So,
thank you, Ian. It's been fantastic having you on, and I think you've been a great knowledge source. Even though these have probably been our longest episodes, guys are going to be able to look back at this.
I would chop it up.
Enjoy it. We'll let them tell us that. They can always fast forward it these days.
And any questions, if people have got questions, hopefully they'll
DM us and we'll get them back to you. No problem.
All right, man.
Ian, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for joining us again on Seal for Good. We'll see you in the next episode.